I need you to prove your own irrelevance to 16 board members in 90 minutes. Can you do that? Or would walking out today be easier? He said it with his arms folded, leaning against the frame of my workspace entrance like he owned the oxygen in the building. 23 years I'd poured into this place. 23 years of earning trust, one conversation at a time, untangling problems that made others quit, turning skeptical strangers into partners who called me by name. And now this man wanted me to stand in front of everyone who mattered and explain why none of it had value anymore. Before you hear what happened next, thank you for being here. If this story makes you feel something, leave a comment telling me what you would have done in my situation. And subscribe because I promise you, nobody sees where this goes. My name is Iris, 51 years old, though people often guess younger, because I never let this work grind me into bitterness, at least not until 6 months ago. I started in this industry when I was 28, fresh from a degree in business relations, and hungry to prove that I could build something real. I joined this organization when it had 70 employees and operated from a single building with water stains on the ceiling tiles. Now it has over 1,000 people across 4 locations. I didn't build it alone, but I built pieces of it that mattered. The relationships that brought in revenue, the trust that kept clients returning year after year, even when competitors offered lower prices. I loved what I did. Client relations sounds boring when you say it like that, but what I really did was solve human problems. I listened when people felt unheard. I delivered when they'd been let down. I followed through when others forgot. And slowly, over 2 decades, I became someone people trusted with the things that mattered most to their businesses. My daughter used to joke that I talked about my clients the way other people talked. About family. She wasn't entirely wrong. When one of my primary contacts lost his father, I flew out to attend the funeral, even though nobody asked me to. When another struggled through a bitter divorce, I spent hours on the phone just listening, because she needed someone outside her company who wouldn't judge her. These weren't networking tactics. They were just how I treated people I cared about. I made good money, not wealthy, but comfortable. My salary after 23 years reflected my experience. My commission structure reflected the fact that I personally managed relationships with our 3 largest clients. Together, those 3 accounted for nearly half of our yearly income. Everyone in leadership knew this. Everyone understood that losing any one of those partnerships would hurt. Losing all 3 would be catastrophic. Then Vincent arrived. He was 34, sharp suits, perfect posture, and a master's degree from a respected program that taught him to view people as resources and problems as opportunities for optimization. The previous director, a woman named Helen who'd mentored me for years, had retired after a health scare. She'd recommended me for her position, but the board wanted someone with fresh perspective, someone who could modernize, someone who spoke fluently in the language of metrics and margin improvement. Vincent's first week, he scheduled individual meetings with everyone in the department. When my turn came, he sat across from me with a notepad and asked me to summarize my role in 5 sentences or less. I tried. I talked about relationship management, about the trust I'd built over decades, about how our clients often reached out to me before they reached out to anyone else because they knew I'd give them honest answers even when those answers weren't convenient for us. He nodded, wrote nothing down. When I finished, he said, "So, you're basically doing sales without the metrics." Got it. I felt something shift in my chest. Not anger, not yet, just recognition that this person and I saw the world in fundamentally incompatible ways. Over the next months, Vincent made changes. He implemented new reporting requirements. Every client interaction had to be logged with detailed time tracking. Every conversation needed documented outcomes. He created performance scorecards that measured relationship managers based on revenue generated per hour of client contact. He started calling our partnerships accounts and referring to people I'd known for decades by their company names instead of their actual names. The department started bleeding morale. 2 people quit within the first 3 months. 1 transferred to a different division. Vincent replaced them with recent graduates who'd learned customer relationship management from textbooks and had never experienced what it felt like to sit across from someone whose business was failing and talk them through the hard decisions that might save it. I tried to adapt. I filled out his forms. I logged my hours. I attended his meetings where he used words like synergy and optimization and disruption, but I couldn't change the fundamental way I worked. My clients didn't operate on spreadsheets. They operated on trust. And trust doesn't have a per-hour metric. 4 months in, Vincent called me into a private meeting. He pulled up a presentation on his laptop and turned it toward me. Revenue projections, cost analysis, personnel expense breakdown. My name appeared on one slide with my annual compensation highlighted in red. "You're expensive," he said. Not unkindly, just factually. "Your salary plus commission structure makes you the highest paid person in the department by 40%. The board is asking me to find margin improvements. They want 30% better numbers by year end." I understood immediately what he wasn't saying. The only way to hit those targets was aggressive cost reduction, and I was the most obvious cost to reduce. "My compensation reflects my experience," I said carefully, "and the relationships I manage generate nearly half of our company's revenue." "Right, but here's the thing." Vincent leaned back, fingers steepled. "Those relationships exist because of institutional reputation, not individual personalities. Our clients partner with us because we deliver quality services, not because they like you personally." "No offense." "None taken," I said, though we both knew that was a lie. "But I'd respectfully disagree. My relationships are personal. They've lasted through leadership changes, service disruptions, pricing increases. They've lasted because the people I work with trust me specifically." Vincent smiled. It was the kind of smile teachers give students who believe in something naive. "Trust is great, but it's not sustainable as a business model. We need scalable processes. We need junior staff who can be trained to manage relationships at a fraction of the cost. That's how we grow." I knew I was being managed out. Not fired, not yet, but positioned. Vincent was building a case, documenting my supposed limitations, setting up a narrative where removing me would look like strategic thinking instead of what it actually was. Short-term cost-cutting that would destroy years of careful relationship building. I decided to be strategic. I documented everything. Every client conversation, every successful negotiation, every time one of my relationships prevented a problem before it became a crisis. I built my own case, showing the value I brought that couldn't be easily replaced. But Vincent was building something else. He started assigning my clients to junior staff members for support purposes. He framed it as mentorship. I was supposed to train my replacements while they slowly took over the relationships I'd spent years cultivating. One of the new hires, a 26-year-old named Brent who talked too fast and interrupted constantly, started joining my calls with my longest-standing client contact, a woman named Faye, who'd been my friend since we were both starting out in this industry 30 years ago. After the third call, where Brent explained things to Faye that she already knew better than he did, she sent me a private message. Just 3 words. "What's happening here?" I couldn't tell her the truth, not yet. So I said we were expanding the team and making sure everyone had backup support. She didn't buy it. Faye had survived 3 decades in this business by reading between every line people spoke. "Iris, if something's changing, I need to know. My company depends on the relationship we've built, not on some kid who just learned what vendor management means last semester." "I understand," I said. "I'm not going anywhere yet." That "yet" hung between us. She heard it. I heard it. We both knew what it meant. 2 weeks later, Vincent called another meeting. This time, 3 other senior leaders attended. They'd prepared a reorganization proposal. My role would be evolved into a training position. I'd spend the next year teaching the junior staff everything I knew about relationship management, then transition into a part-time consulting arrangement. My salary would be reduced by 60% immediately to reflect the new responsibilities. "This way, you can ease into retirement," Vincent said, like he was doing me a favor. "Spend more time with family, pursue hobbies. You've earned it after all these years." I was 51. I had no intention of retiring. My daughter was 24 and building her own career. My hobbies included reading and hiking, neither of which required me to give up work I loved. This wasn't about easing me into anything. This was about cutting costs while extracting every piece of knowledge from my brain before showing me to the exit. "I need time to think about this," I said. Vincent's expression tightened. "Of course. Take the weekend, but we need an answer Monday. The board is expecting movement on the margin improvements." That weekend, my phone rang. It was someone I hadn't heard from in almost a year. His name was Gerard, and he ran one of our largest client organizations. We'd gone to university together, back when we both had more ambition than sense. He'd been the best man at my wedding before it ended. I'd helped him navigate a brutal company merger that nearly destroyed his career. We'd stayed in touch over the decades, and 5 years ago, when his company needed a new primary vendor for services we provided, he'd reached out to me personally. I heard rumors, Gerard said without preamble, about changes at your organization. I shouldn't have been surprised. This industry talked. People moved between companies. Information traveled through networks built over decades of working together. Things are shifting, I admitted carefully. New leadership with different priorities. Different priorities meaning cost-cutting, meaning pushing out experienced people to hire cheaper replacements. Something like that. Gerard was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. More formal, more careful. I'm calling because I have a proposition. We're creating a new senior position, Vice President of Vendor Relations. The role would involve evaluating all our existing partnerships, determining which ones provide genuine value and which we maintain out of habit. It requires someone with deep industry knowledge and enough experience to make difficult decisions without getting pressured by vendors who think a nice dinner buys loyalty. My heart started beating faster. That sounds like a significant role. It is. Compensation would reflect that. And honestly, Iris, you're the first person I thought of. You understand relationships. You understand value. You've never sold me something I didn't need just to hit your numbers. I trust you to tell me the truth even when it's uncomfortable. Your company is one of my primary accounts, I said slowly. There would be a conflict. Not if you weren't working there anymore. The implications settled around me like a blanket, heavy, but warm. I'm not saying you have to decide now, Gerard continued. But think about it. If your current organization is pushing you out anyway, you could land somewhere that values what you bring. And between us, my company spends enough with your organization that having someone with inside knowledge on our side wouldn't hurt during contract renegotiations. He didn't say it directly, but I heard the unspoken message clearly. If I joined his organization, I'd be in a position to review the very partnership that currently generated 42% of my employer's annual revenue. I'd be evaluating whether that relationship should continue, and I'd be doing it with comprehensive understanding of exactly how much my current organization depended on it. Send me the details, I said. Everything and get back to you. The job description arrived Monday morning. The compensation was substantial, more than I currently made, even with my commission structure. The role had authority, respect, and most importantly, it would position me across from my current employer during contract negotiations instead of representing them. I met with Vincent that afternoon to discuss his reorganization proposal. I asked questions. I reviewed timelines. I negotiated minor details about the training transition, and then I told him I needed another week to consider everything fully. He wasn't happy, but he couldn't push too hard without making it obvious this was a forced exit rather than a mutual evolution. That week, I had 3 more conversations with Gerard. We discussed expectations, responsibilities, timelines. His organization wanted someone who could start within a month. They were beginning a comprehensive vendor review in 8 weeks. My current employer's contract was the largest, and therefore first on the evaluation list. I accepted Gerard's offer on a Thursday afternoon. My start date would be 3 weeks out. I didn't tell anyone at my current job, not yet. I needed the timing to be precise. 3 days later, Vincent summoned me to his workspace. He looked pleased with himself in a way that made my stomach tighten. I've been thinking about how to handle your transition, he said, and I realized we have an opportunity here. The board meeting is in 3 days. They want updates on the margin improvement initiatives. I think you should present the reorganization plan yourself. I stared at him. You want me to present my own role reduction to the board? Not reduction. Evolution. And yes, think about it. You know your role better than anyone. You can explain exactly how your responsibilities can be redistributed, how the junior staff can be trained to handle client relationships, how we can maintain service quality while significantly reducing personnel costs. Who better to make that case than you? He wanted me to argue for my own obsolescence, to stand in front of 16 board members and senior leaders and explain why they didn't need me anymore, to make the case for my own professional execution. while he sat back and collected credit for strategic thinking and decisive leadership. "And if I refuse?" I asked quietly. Vincent's smile didn't change. "Then I present it myself, but it would look better coming from you. More collaborative, more evidence that this is a natural evolution, rather than a forced change. Plus, it shows you're a team player, even during difficult transitions. That matters for future references, consulting opportunities, things like that." The threat was clear: cooperate and leave with dignity, or resist and leave with a damaged reputation. "I need you to prove your own irrelevance to 16 board members in 90 minutes. Can you do that? Or would walking out today be easier?" I looked at him, standing there, so certain he'd won, so convinced he'd cornered me perfectly. And I made my decision. "I'll do it," I said. "I'll create the presentation. I'll present it to the board. I'll make it thorough and convincing." Vincent's smile widened. "Excellent. I knew you'd see reason. Get me a draft by tomorrow so I can review it before the meeting." I spent the next 3 days building exactly what he'd asked for. 47 slides detailing every aspect of my role. How my client relationships could be divided among 3 junior staff members. How my strategic planning work could be absorbed by newly created committees. How my mentorship could be formalized into training programs managed by others. I made it professional. I made it thorough. I made it devastating. And then I added slide 48. The board meeting was scheduled for Thursday morning at 9. Vincent sent me a message the night before reminding me to dress professionally and keep my tone neutral. He wanted this to feel inevitable, like a natural business evolution rather than what it actually was. I arrived 30 minutes early. The meeting room was on the top floor with windows overlooking the city. 16 people would be attending. Board members I'd known for years, senior leaders I'd worked alongside, finance executives who viewed people as numbers on quarterly reports, and Vincent, sitting near the front where he could watch everything unfold. They filtered in gradually. Some nodded at me with expressions that looked like pity. Others avoided eye contact entirely. Everyone knew what this presentation was really about. Everyone understood I'd been put in an impossible position. The CEO, a man named Walter who'd joined the organization 8 years ago, took his seat at the head of the arrangement. He'd always treated me with respect. We'd worked together on several major negotiations, but respect doesn't save jobs when the numbers demand sacrifice. "Whenever you're ready, Iris," Walter said gently. I opened my laptop and connected it to the projection system. Slide 1 appeared on the wall behind me. Simple title: Role Evolution and Transition Strategy. "Thank you all for being here," I began. "Over the past weeks, leadership has asked me to evaluate my current role and develop a comprehensive plan for how my responsibilities could be restructured to improve operational efficiency. What follows is that analysis." Vincent nodded encouragingly, like a conductor pleased with his orchestra. I clicked to slide 2. My current responsibilities laid out in detail. Client relationship management for our 3 largest partnerships. Strategic planning for expansion into new markets. Mentorship for junior staff members. Advisory participation in contract negotiations. Slide 3 showed time allocation. How many hours weekly I spent on each responsibility. Vincent had insisted on this level of detail. He wanted the board to see exactly what they were paying for, and question whether it justified my compensation. I moved through the slides methodically. Slide 7 analyzed my largest client relationship, the one with Gerard's company. I explained the history, the revenue generated, the communication patterns. I outlined how this relationship could be transitioned to a junior staff member, with proper training and support. Several board members took notes. One woman I'd known for over a decade looked increasingly uncomfortable. Slide 15 detailed the second major partnership, another long-term relationship built over years of consistent delivery and personal trust. I explained how this, too, could be managed by less expensive personnel once the proper processes were documented. Vincent leaned back in his chair, arms folded, expression satisfied. This was going exactly as he'd planned. By slide 23, I'd covered all 3 major client relationships. By slide 30, I'd outlined complete transition timelines. By slide 38, I'd presented cost savings projections that would make any CFO smile. The finance director raised his hand. "These numbers are impressive. If we can truly maintain relationship quality while reducing personnel costs by this much, the margin improvement would exceed our annual targets. That's the goal." Vincent interjected smoothly. Iris has done excellent work documenting how we can evolve beyond personality-dependent relationships into process-driven partnership management. I continued. Slide 40 detailed the training program I'd developed for junior staff. Slide 43 outlined knowledge transfer protocols. Slide 45 showed a week-by-week transition schedule spanning 10 weeks. Slide 46 addressed potential risks, client dissatisfaction, communication gaps during transition, loss of institutional knowledge. I presented mitigation strategies for each concern. Vincent had asked me to be thorough, so I was. Slide 47 concluded with a summary. Total, timeline, 10 weeks. Total cost savings, substantial. Total risk, manageable with proper execution. Walter leaned forward. This is comprehensive work, Iris. I appreciate the professionalism you've brought to a difficult situation. Several others nodded. Agreement. Vincent's expression bordered on triumph. Any questions before I conclude? I asked. The board members glanced at each other. A few shook their heads. They thought they'd seen everything. They thought the presentation was over. Actually, I said, letting my voice shift slightly, there's one additional item. Context that's relevant to the transition planning. Slide 48. I clicked forward. The slide was simple. Just text. A formal letter on official stationery from Gerard's organization, the company responsible for 42% of our annual revenue. Walter leaned forward, reading. His expression changed within seconds. The pleasant neutrality vanished, replaced by something between shock and calculation. The letter was dated 2 weeks earlier. It announced that, effective immediately, I would be joining their organization as Senior Vice President of Vendor Relations. It detailed my new responsibilities, conducting comprehensive reviews of all existing supplier partnerships to determine which relationships provided genuine value versus which were maintained through inertia or habit. Our company was specifically named as the first partnership scheduled for evaluation. The letter concluded, with professional courtesy, thanking me for accepting their offer and noting that my decades of industry experience and intimate knowledge of vendor management standards made me uniquely qualified to help their organization make strategic decisions about which partnerships to maintain, renegotiate, or terminate. My official start date was listed as 3 weeks from today. Vincent's face drained of expression. He sat frozen, processing what he was seeing. That can't, he started, then stopped. It is, I said quietly. I accepted their offer 6 days ago. My resignation letter will be on Walter's inbox within the hour. My start date is 21 days from now. One board member, a woman who'd served for 15 years, broke the developing tension. Let me understand this correctly. You're leaving to join our largest client, and your first responsibility in that role will be evaluating whether they should continue their partnership with us? That's accurate, I confirmed. Another board member, younger, with a background in risk management, spoke up. And based on your transition timeline here, our restructuring won't be complete for 10 weeks, which means when you begin your partnership review, we'll be in the middle of transitioning your relationships to untrained junior staff. You'll be watching us fumble the very relationships you built, and then you'll be deciding whether we're still worth 42% of your new employer's vendor budget. Also accurate, I said. Vincent finally found his voice. This is unethical. You can't use insider knowledge to sabotage us from a competitor position. They're not a competitor, I corrected calmly. They're a client. And I'm not sabotaging anyone. I'm simply accepting a career opportunity that values my experience. Everything in my new role will be conducted with complete professional integrity. I'll evaluate our partnership based on the same criteria I'll use for every other vendor relationship they maintain. Walter turned to Vincent, and his voice carried an edge I'd rarely heard. Whose idea was this presentation? Vincent tried to respond, but nothing coherent emerged. He looked trapped. Let me clarify, I said. 3 days ago, Vincent asked me to create this presentation. His exact words were that I should prove my own irrelevance to the board, that I should make it thorough and convincing. He suggested that if I refused, walking out immediately would be easier. I chose to do exactly what he asked. A third board member, someone from finance, did the mental arithmetic quickly. So if we proceed with this termination plan, we'll be executing a transition during the exact window when she's evaluating whether to recommend continuing a contract worth millions annually. and we just spent 90 minutes making her present her own professional execution, which gives her every personal and professional reason to recommend terminating that contract. And if we don't proceed, the risk management board member added, we're keeping an employee who's already accepted another position, who'll be leaving in 3 weeks regardless, who has no incentive to protect our interests anymore. Walter rubbed his forehead. Iris, can you give us the room? I nodded, closed my laptop, and walked out. Vincent remained seated, looking like he wanted to disappear into the furniture. I waited in a small break area down the hall. 20 minutes passed, then 40. Finally, Walter emerged and gestured for me to follow him to a private office. That was quite a presentation, he said once we were alone. Vincent asked for thorough and convincing. He got both. Walter sat down heavily. I need to know something. Did you plan this as retaliation? I considered the question carefully. Gerard offered me the position 6 months ago, right when Vincent started restructuring the department. I was hesitant initially. I liked working here. I'd built something meaningful over 2 decades. But watching Vincent systematically devalue everything I'd contributed, watching him treat relationships like they were interchangeable spreadsheet entries, watching him set up this humiliation, that made my decision easy. I accepted the offer 2 weeks before Vincent asked me to create today's presentation. I just didn't tell anyone. So slide 48 wasn't revenge. Slide 48 was information Vincent would have known if he'd bothered to see me as a person instead of a cost reduction opportunity. The fact that it destroyed his strategy isn't revenge. It's simply the natural consequence of his own actions. Walter was silent for a long moment. The board wants to make you an offer. 6 months as a transition consultant. You'd help establish the new vendor relationship management structure while settling into your new role. We'd pay triple your current salary for the consulting work. Part-time engagement, no conflict with your new position. And Vincent, he's being reassigned. Different division, no direct reports, no budget authority. We can't terminate him without creating more chaos, but he won't be making strategic decisions anymore. I thought about it. The money was substantial. The arrangement would give me leverage at both organizations. And most importantly, it would demonstrate to my new employer that I could navigate complex transitions professionally. I'll do it, I said, but I need complete autonomy in the consulting role. No interference from Vincent or anyone else trying to manage how I work. Done. We shook hands. I left Walter's office and returned to my workspace to collect my belongings. Vincent was nowhere to be seen. Someone later told me he'd left the building immediately after the board meeting ended. 3 weeks later, I started my new position. The consulting arrangement with my former employer began simultaneously. For 6 months, I worked both roles, helping establish new processes while simultaneously evaluating whether those processes met my new employer's standards for vendor partnerships. The evaluation I conducted was scrupulously fair. I reviewed metrics, interviewed stakeholders, analyzed service quality data. In the end, I recommended continuing the partnership, but with modified terms. Lower volume, renegotiated pricing, stricter performance standards. My former employer lost about 30% of the contract value but kept the relationship. Vincent lasted 8 more months before he resigned. I heard through industry contacts that he took a position at a smaller company where his optimization strategies could be implemented without the messy complication of long-term relationships getting in the way. I'm still in my new role now, 2 years later. I manage vendor relationships worth hundreds of millions annually. I make decisions that affect dozens of companies and thousands of jobs. And I do it with the same principle I always followed. Relationships matter. Trust matters. People aren't line items on cost reduction spreadsheets. Sometimes former colleagues reach out asking how I pulled it off, how I turned humiliation into leverage, how I beat someone who seemed to hold all the power. The answer isn't complicated. I didn't beat Vincent. I simply let him beat himself while I built something better. The most devastating thing you can do to someone who's trying to destroy you isn't to fight them directly. It's to be 10 steps ahead while they're still congratulating themselves on step 1. Slide 48 wasn't revenge. It was just information. But information delivered at precisely the right moment becomes something more powerful than revenge. It becomes justice. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever been in a position where someone tried to make you complicit in your own destruction, leave a comment and tell me how you handled it. And subscribe, because these stories matter. They remind us that power isn't always what it appears to be, and sometimes the quietest moves are the ones that change everything.